Jackal Among Snakes. Author, Nemorosus. Chapter 211, Rigging the Odds. The time that Argrave spent with his companions in the village without a name was probably the happiest Argrave had ever been in Berenda. Though the food was exceedingly simple, their neighbors were unhappy at their presence, and the days were cold and stiff. He'd never known finer company than those Argrave traveled with. Being in life or death situations made their trust unbreakable, their honesty comforting, and their presence easing. Durin practiced with Guilliman, trying to adapt to only having a forefinger and thumb on his left hand. When that wasn't happening, the tattooed tribal delved into books. Of late, he seemed to be inspired about something. He spent a particularly long amount of time focusing on previously untouched necromantic spell books written by Garm. Argrave was somewhat concerned, but he trusted Durin was a good enough person to use necromancy wisely. Annalise and Argrave focused on their magic studies. She was half tutor, half peer, and Argrave learned much and more studying with her. Never once did it feel like a chore. Indeed, it felt like a blessing. Probably because they'd been enduring deadly struggles for weeks on end. Or maybe the blessing was simply the fact he got to spend time with Annalise. His study into a particular spell bore fruit after a while. An invisible tempest swirling in Argrave's hands splayed the grass flat against the ground. He held his hands out, and the power freed itself. The wind took visible form, though it was like a pane of glass against grass. It was the shape of an armored knight holding a gargantuan tower shield perhaps 8 feet tall. The knight braced, then swung the shield from left to right with tremendous force. Wind split through the vast plain ahead of him with tremendous force. Grass and the dirt in the tempest's path were both torn asunder, upturned by the seemingly indomitable force pushing past. In only a few seconds, a vast area of wintry grass had simply been removed, much of the dirt beneath it similarly uprooted. The knight vanished, yet the wind kept traveling across the plains before them, splaying the grass flat and slowly losing power. Hey! Argrave raised his hand to his mouth, hiding a smile as he giggled. Dirt and grass peppered the area ahead of them. Good gods! Quite a potent wind spell, Annalise remarked, standing with arms crossed behind Argrave. Compared to most of the other B-rank spells of different elements, it might be a little less potent. Argrave nodded. My, Pavi's Gale, wouldn't do near as much damage as their ice-bound twin blades you used at the Mard Hallowed Grounds. The strongest point is the initial swing of the Pavis, and after, it weakens by the second. Argrave turned his head back to her and walked up. But it's a lot cheaper than most B-rank spells. It can protect me while it's active, it forces foes away from me, and it's fitting when you consider I still have that ring that augments wind spells I got at Just. Moreover, I intend on keeping my tried and true strategy. Annalise tilted her head. And what is that? Sword and shield, Argrave said. Keep my opponents away with one hand, while I conjure electric eels with the other to do concentrated bursts of attack. Lightning magic is precise and deadly. Most other spells are more wide range. I might cause more devastation if I use innumerable powerful fire, ice, or earth spells, but I can learn those later. For now, this is highly efficient. And what of B-rank lightning magic? Electric eel is still C-rank, Annalise noted. Argrave put his hand to his chin. They exist, certainly. You've learned some, he pointed to her. They're the deadliest I could learn barring blood magic, but none are as precise as electric eel, she finished. Argrave nodded. Yeah, I can direct 8 eels to attack different targets, and they do so with pinpoint accuracy. No collateral damage, too. Spells like the B-rank, Cloudborn Chain, are incredibly long-range and uncomfortably fast, yet it can only strike one target, whereupon the electricity spreads out for a short distance, Argrave summarized. Very deadly, but lacking versatility. Annalise took a deep breath and sighed. What's the matter? Argrave stepped forth. Annalise looked at him with sad eyes. We're to be facing foes capable of spells like that in the future. Argrave raised his hand to her face and brushed aside a strand of her long white hair. Our armor is better than you might think. And the whole reason I had you get the Star Sparrow was so that we can scout ahead, avoid fights entirely. The only way I see us losing against most normal opponents is if we're ambushed. Our own capability does not diminish danger entirely. One misstep, one ambush unforeseen. That is all it takes to meet the end, and the likelihood of that is great now that you are a target of public interest. You are known as a contributor in stopping the plague, a hero to some, yet a target to others. Others, who? She shook her head. I apologize. It is not like me to be rattled so. Argrave took her into his arms at once. I hear you, he said, chin resting gently atop her head. And I worry too, believe me, I don't have to tell you. I can't deny I want to stay in this little village with you, living happily until we expire. Argrave shook his head. But there's a big obstacle to that in the shape of a world ender. And a bunch of little obstacles along the way. We've got stupid people grasping for power at the wrong time, ancient evils waking up, and a whole lot of chores to do before we can rest. Annalise laughed quietly into his shoulder. I cannot picture how you managed that all this time. He finally pulled away and held her face before his. I think you do, because you're doing it too. Now. You have been for a while. We're racing headlong to oblivion. Whether we stop it or embrace it, I guess we'll figure out. Darren was so engrossed in reading on the house's porch that he did not hear Argrave approach. Naturally, the opportunity was not wasted. Argrave crept up behind him and grasped his shoulders suddenly and fiercely. Darren cried out and thrust his elbow at Argrave's face in reflex. With a step back, the elbow whizzed by his face, and Argrave stood there laughing. "You mother!" Darren held his hand to his face, then eventually joined Argrave in laughter. "Good gods! Next time, I won't miss, you know." "We'll see." Argrave stepped forth and sat beside Darren. "You've been working hard lately," he noted. "Well, it's hard to stand about twiddling my thumbs when everyone else is working night and day." "I blame you freaks." Darren shook his head. He picked up the book he'd thrown aside after the scare. He was still a bit rattled, and he took some time to calm himself, cursing at Argrave. "But, necromancy?" Argrave noted the book's cover. Though still a low-rank necromantic spell, it was necromancy nonetheless. The spell Darren read only allowed him to take notice of spirits, harmless, ostensibly, but it was a gateway spell. "Yeah, had some plans for a couple people that I dislike." Darren nodded. Argrave laughed, knowing he was joking. Orion might not go down so easily. "We'll see," Darren repeated Argrave's earlier claim. "Anybody dies if you drop something heavy enough from a high place. Get a wyvern." He finally broke into laughter, unable to keep a straight face. "But seriously," Argrave cut into the amusement. "Why now? You avoided the stuff earlier." Darren scratched beneath his chin. He hadn't shaved recently, and stubble had formed. "Well, seeing the corpse pup-eater, that whole scenario, really got me thinking." "That was power, incontrovertible power. Beyond that, I thought." Darren raised up his left hand. "Maybe there's some freaky magic I could pull." "Freaky magic?" Argrave raised a brow. "You know, reanimate fingers, sew them back on." Darren waved his left hand about. "I even asked Guilliman if he'd be willing to donate." Argrave stared at him in awe. "What?" "He'd be fine overnight," Darren said defensively. "Maybe I could give back some blood." "I don't know." "Whatever." He shook his head. His fingers were too big, anyway, and things don't work that way. They'd either wriggle at their own will if I gave them souls or stay stiff if I didn't, and neither suit my needs. Argrave wrung his hands together uncomfortably, acutely aware of the fact he had fingers. "Like I told you, we can make an early trip to Visn." "Forget fingers. You can regrow entire legs if you head out there," Argrave advised. "Forget it. I don't need it, and it's a significant detour." Darren shook his head. "Whenever you plan to go is when we'll go. It's just..." Argrave clenched his hands a bit tighter against each other. "Annalise told me you got that saving me after I passed out." Darren stared ahead. "Doesn't really matter when. It just happened. Bottom line, I'm fine with it." "Thank you," Argrave said. "I'm grateful." "Better be," Darren said. Argrave knew his arrogance was spurred by embarrassment, so he only laughed at the former tribal's response. They stared out across the countryside of wintry grass in silence, nothing but the sound of the wind on their ears. "We'll be heading to a big city after the Tower of the Grey Owl." "Derica?" Argrave turned his head. "Yeah?" Darren met his gaze. "You deserve a break. I'll give you some money, do whatever the hell you want, so long as you don't draw any attention. Significant attention, at least." Darren's eyes brightened. "How much money?" "More than you'll need," Argrave said simply. Darren smiled. "I deserve it," he said, poking his chest. "Maybe I can wash out some of those prayers Ryan taught me with good memories." "I hope so." Argrave rose to his feet with a grunt. "I still have to talk with Guilliman soon." Darren watched Argrave as he walked away, trying to have a heart-to-heart with everyone. "Yeah." Argrave stopped. "We leave soon. Maybe I'll talk with him on the road." Darren put his elbows on his knees. "I feel less special." Argrave chuckled, then walked away. They spent a total of 2 weeks at the isolated, sparsely populated village on the edge of the northwest. It might have been shorter, but the stay was extended by Argrave's studies into magic, as casting a few B-rank spells consequently delayed the rate at which he was able to repay the debt to Earl Abney. He dared not leave before he was certain he was capable of defending himself and his companions to the best of his ability. Argrave felt he was snowballing. Becoming black-blooded was no minor thing, and the edge it gave him over others made itself known day by day. Already he had more actual magic than Annalise, despite the fact she was both several years older and had been at B rank longer than he had. At A rank, their next objective in terms of personal power, magic capacity did not matter. It was more about knowledge, talent, and comprehension, all three of which Annalise had in spades. She knew infinitely more spells at each rank than he did. He planned their route around that, and so, after the ample amounts of rest and preparation they'd undergone, the four of them departed in the early morning, saying their goodbyes only to the widow who had generously allowed them to stay for a minor payment. Emboldened and well-rested, they headed towards the Tower of the Grey Owl cautiously. The Titanic building became visible very quickly, serving as an easy landmark to guide their travels. For some reason, Argrave felt a sense of paranoia during the whole trip. He had been happy these past 2 weeks. It was well past time for the other shoe to drop. He'd be sure to catch it. Chapter 212, Advantage Play. Though Argrave had claimed he would have a heart-to-heart with Guilliman, the task proved considerably more difficult once he actually found himself riding his horse next to the elven vampire. As they traveled in a relatively safe area, "Don't bother," Guilliman said, riding his horse diligently. "No need to make sure I'm fine." Argrave pulled his horse up to Guilliman. He was starting to learn to ride horses better, yet he still found himself lacking when compared to the experienced rider that was Guilliman. Argrave would assume that his companion would ride infrequently, being as large as he was, but apparently such was not the case. "You heard what I said to Dran, then? Not fond of a heart-to-heart?" Argrave questioned, riding closer. Guilliman looked to him for a moment, his glance alone confirming what Argrave asked. After deliberating for a long while, he finally constructed something he was relatively sure would work. "Have you thought about what you're going to do once I cure your vampirism?" Guilliman finally kept his gaze on Argrave. His white eyes betrayed little, doubly so beneath his helmet, but eventually he let out the lightest of chuckles. "It depends on whether my 10-year period of servitude is up," he said. Argrave laughed. "I'd very nearly forgotten about that," he admitted. "I don't really know what you like to do, though. I don't know what you want out of life." "I am simple." Guilliman shook his head. "Simple how?" Argrave pressed, lowering his head as they passed beneath bare branches. Winter was past its prime, and the hibernating trees seemed to be a little livelier. Perhaps, in time, leaves would adorn them once more. Guilliman slowed his horse to pass by a treacherous part of the terrain. "All I've ever wanted is to do something decent that secures my family's future, and then retire with them." Guilliman took a deep breath and sighed. "The people around me always made me do more, demanded more of me. First Driz, now you." Argrave looked vaguely uncomfortable. "I didn't mean to." "I'm fine with it," Guilliman assured at once. "I am proud of what I've done. I just never planned to do it." Guilliman stroked the side of his horse's neck to comfort it. "Vade charts my fate. If this is what she decided for me, I will rise to meet the task." Argrave nodded, thinking more on what Guilliman said. "Why do you have so much faith in Vade?" Guilliman considered that. "My parents taught me to." Argrave had not been expecting such a simple answer. "You're dissatisfied?" Guilliman noted. "I fought in war after war alongside Driz. That tested my faith time and time again. After I contracted vampirism, I wandered Berenda. My faith was challenged constantly. No challenge ever bested that faith my parents instilled in me." Guilliman examined his gauntleted hands as they clenched the reins. "I know other gods are real. I have seen the ways of other people. And what I concluded is that I love the Vadaimon. I love our ways. I am partial to my kind. I wish to see them prosper before others. I will admit it. And Vade, she protects those I love. Such is her sole purpose. She molded our society, our people, our ways. And so I love Vade." Argrave always had some difficulty understanding Guilliman as a person. Now, though, he felt like he got a glimpse into the man he truly was. He hadn't intended to, but it happened nonetheless. This might be the most Guilliman had talked about himself before. "I respect you," Argrave said plainly. "And I admire you. I wouldn't be here if not for you, not just because you saved my life. You were a model for persistence." Guilliman nodded. "I'm glad." "I try." Argrave bit his lip, deliberating on whether or not he should say something. Eventually, he asked, "How would you feel if I supported Irian?" Guilliman's mouth noticeably tightened. "Supported?" he questioned. "I think he can be a genuinely good person. If he has the right influence, as it is now, his family life. It's part of the reason he is who he is." Argrave rubbed his hands together. "Instead of a crusader, maybe I can make him a proselytizer." "A peaceful proselytizer," he posited. "Can you?" Guilliman asked sharply. Argrave sighed. "I don't know." Guilliman looked guilty at his sharpness. "I don't like him. I think he's a danger to the Vadaimon. I would sleep easier if he died." "You don't sleep anyway," Argrave pointed out. The elven vampire furrowed his brows for half a moment before he caught on and laughed. A laugh from Guilliman was a rare and scary thing, so Argrave smiled. Feeling he should leave on a positive note, Argrave tried to conclude the conversation. "I'm glad you told me honestly," he told Guilliman, "and I'll take your counsel into mind." "Believe me." Guilliman only grunted. "Another day or two of covert travel. We'll make it to King's End." Argrave changed the subject. "There, we can get you and Duran better outfitted, get better weapons." "From what I remember, you didn't ask for much, did you?" "My greatsword is more than enough." Guilliman shook his head. "I asked for replenished enchanted arrows, plus specific arm requests." Duran had the ostentatious orders. "Excellent." Argrave nodded. "Things are looking up, but we'll proceed carefully, as always. Now more than ever, caution must be the sole thing we trust in. This civil war can be resolved splendidly. And it might just be time for me to step outside of my comfort zone." "Meaning?" "Doing things I've never done before. Not in Heroes of Berenda. Creating options that weren't there for me," Argrave said plainly. "I've caused things to go out of control. That, alone, tells me I have an effect. But if I play things wisely, maybe it won't be all bad." Argrave smiled, his gaze distant. "In fact, it might be fantastic." Argrave and his companions took shelter just behind a hill. Beyond, there was a large town nestled between hills. It was not large in the sense that it was populous. Indeed, with rocky terrain and sparse natural resources, it was in an inopportune location, and consequently could not support a large population. Yet the houses and buildings in it were each and all grand and impeccably constructed, and the tall wall around made it seem even formidable. Annalise opened her eyes and took a deep breath, while the star sparrow perched itself on her shoulders. "All right, I have examined things thoroughly." She adjusted herself, gathering her bearings after using druidic magic for so long. "Take your time," Argrave eased her. "I spotted Orion's royal knights. They were standing outside a building, guarding." "I presume Orion is within," she began. "Beyond that, I believe things are as you said. I searched for those wearing the uniform of a high wizard but found none. I noticed no sizable military force beyond militiamen and guards for important order buildings." Argrave nodded, parsing through what she said. He let his paranoia run rampant as he considered everything he knew about King's End. "Orion's royal knights?" he said. "Are you sure of this?" Annalise paused. Without a word, she cast the druidic spell again and the bird vanished from her shoulder. Argrave waited patiently, and she spoke again after a time. "They are not those we traveled with, the Wax Knights." Guilt flavored her tone, as though ashamed of her lack of awareness. Argrave took a deep breath and exhaled. "It's fine. We caught it, and that's what's important." He nodded carefully. "I'd like you to see what you can glean about those within the building. They might still be Orion's knights. He may have simply changed them out." As Annalise carried out Argrave's directive, he shared a glance with Duran. Though Annalise said nothing for a long while, she eventually contributed. "There is a man within. He looks somewhat like you. Tall, taller than me, but shorter than you. Blue eyes, and a lithe build." Argrave finished, recalling Indune's appearance all too well. "Am I right? Or is he quite skinny?" "It could be Levin." No, your first descriptor was more accurate. He seems a warrior," Annalise noted. "Though he is dressed in fine clothes, clearly not meant for battle." Argrave took a deep, long breath, obvious questions rushing to his mind at once as he struggled to grasp why Indune might be here. He felt his heart beat a little faster and brushed his cheek that had been wounded by Indune months ago almost by instinct. "Survey the whole town once more," Argrave directed her. "The inside of each building, every nook and cranny. Any places ambushes might be." "Of course," Annalise agreed readily, and then the party settled back into quietude. Argrave felt anxious, so he rose to his feet and gazed over the hill. After a much longer time, Annalise's bird returned once more. She held her forehead as though pained. "The homes all seemed ordinary. None were waiting in ambush. There are only 4 royal knights down there, 2 without the home, and 2 within. I cannot speak to the presence of magic users within the town." She shook her head in regret. Argrave nodded. "You've done enough." He took a deep breath. "If Indune has no agents in the town beyond the 4 royal knights with him, he won't notice if I search the town for magic users so long as I avoid where he is. If he does have more there, A-rank mages, for instance, we cut our losses, move past King's End." "Argrave, this is the man that attacked you, right?" "The man who gave you Foamspire?" Annalise questioned, and when Argrave nodded, she continued. "Yet he is not dressed to fight. I do not believe he bears a sword, even. Nor does he seem particularly incensed." Argrave took her observation into consideration. 4 royal knights. And Indune. That's... He rubbed his thumb against his palm. He could not deny Indune still intimidated him somewhat. Yet the more he thought of it, the more he felt he would be capable of fighting against that. Indune was unarmored. He might have some enchanted items, but spells beyond B-rank did not work well as enchantments. That was the reason Argrave and Annalise only had rings that conjured B-rank wards. Indune himself was B-rank. "I'll survey for spellcasters in hiding," Argrave said. "Guilliman, you'll come with. Keep an eye out for anything suspicious. I won't step foot near Indune unless I'm 1000% sure this isn't some ambush." Orion might have his reasons for sending Indune, and if you don't find anything wrong?" Guilliman questioned. Argrave rubbed his hands together. Indune. He was a man far too comfortable with death. He enjoyed it, reveled in it. Acts of cruelty and eccentricity were commonplace from him. That, coupled with being the crown prince of Veska, boded ill for the future. On top of that, he had a great deal of Princess Eleanor's support, even if she did only view him as a tool. So long as he remained around. Indune is a problem for the future, Argrave concluded aloud. A problem for the realm. A problem for us. Argrave had been merely avoiding the problem this whole time, but in the back of his head, he knew what it might eventually come to. Could someone like Indune be redeemed? Moreover, should he be? Argrave thought the answer was no on both counts. The man enjoyed orphaning children, senseless violence, and was completely intolerant of anyone with agendas divergent from his own. Worse yet, he was talented enough to do real damage in a position of leadership. Duran adjusted the way he sat. "You mean, provided I find nothing amiss in the town? He's far from Diroka, alone, isolated, not prepared for combat. On top of that..." Argrave tried to make sure his nervousness didn't bleed into his voice. "There might not be a better time. You have to seize an opportunity, some would say." A grim silence set over them as Argrave all but confirmed what he had been implying. "That would end your association with Orion permanently," Annalise counseled. "I know," Argrave nodded, looking to Guilliman. "But no matter how much I juggle it in my head, I cannot see supporting Veska as an option. They're too far gone." Annalise looked to the town below. "I do not believe he means to kill you. He comes unarmored, he brings few guards," she said simply, "and He has knowledge of your mother. What does that matter? Argrave furrowed his brows. I'm sure plenty do. And I don't care all that much anyway. I do not know. Annalise shook her head. Ignore my thoughts if you wish. Argrave looked at her, then glanced to Kinsend. Though it was a savage sentiment, he would be more comfortable fighting Indune than talking with him. I won't risk walking into a trapped building. I don't see why it's worth the risk just to hear him out. But Argrave took a deep breath. I don't know. I'm not confident in killing him from afar. Royal Knights are Royal Knights for a reason. And Indune wouldn't hesitate to involve the populace to save his skin. If I get close, maybe I can restrict his movements. Argrave shook his head. Guilliman and I will scout things out. From there, I'll make a judgment call. Chapter 213, A Prince's Gamble. There was a thin line between caution and paranoia. It was thin enough that Argrave lost sight of it completely. Maybe it was never tangible to begin with. He felt half a fool as he wandered around Kinsend, looking for any single person who might be a threat to him or his companions. He and Guilliman scanned the building Indune stayed in from afar, checking for other people within or secret compartments where enemies might hide. They checked everywhere inside and miles outside the town. And the conclusion? This was likely the best circumstance he could encounter in Dune. He had only 4 guards, Royal Knights, and perhaps the finest quality in all Vasca. All 4 were mages of B rank, though low within the rank at best. Indune had not advanced to A rank, and he was unarmored and unsupported. The only armed men in the town consisted of a militia, perhaps 20, and all attended the wall. There were 2 attending wizards of the Grey Owl, both of which manned an administrative center opposite where Indune stayed. The tower was not accepting acolytes at this date. They had no reason to man this place thoroughly, even if they were Indune's people. They were C rank. As that conclusion settled upon them, Argrave confronted the reality of what he was going to do, though he spoke about putting an end to Indune permanently. The fact remained that it persisted in his mind like a dark cloud. Everything, from the irony of the town's name to the fact he might become known as a kinslayer. It clung to him, pushing aside important thoughts. After an hour of walking, thinking, searching, the bottom line came to him. Argrave had to face his fears for the good of the future. He'd done it time and time again the past few months. This one, though, it felt markedly different. Maybe it was because he was premeditating a murder if he didn't hear what he wanted to hear. Maybe it was because he had already faced Indune before and walked away with his teeth cut. No answer came to his question as he took slow, steady steps towards the 2 golden armored knights standing out front the quaint house that Prince Indune was waiting for him in. The knights caught sight of the 3 of them at once. Argrave, Darren, Annalise. Guilliman was elsewhere, his bow readied. Darren had the ebony axe. Everyone was ready for any outcome. The knights' eyes followed them from behind their gleaming golden plate helmets. Argrave took the lead, his finger rubbing against the enchanted ring that conjured B-rank wards just beneath his glove. When Argrave stepped up, the 2 knights looked at him for a time before saying anything. He saw them focus on his eyes like they jewels, then passed to his companions, evaluating. The prince is inside, the royal knight on the left told Argrave. The bastard is outside, Argrave returned. The royal knight stared up at him, eyes steady. He'll receive you now, the right side knight directed. Argrave smiled. You see, that's the first mistake. Orion wouldn't receive me. No, I suppose that's the second mistake. You left the windows unblocked. His gaze jumped between the 2 of them. I'm trying to recognize either of you. Were you there the last time Indune and I spoke? I can't remember. Indune's knights were so good at playing it straight that Argrave might have believed them if he had been bluffing. The knight on the left side stepped forward. You should go inside. I don't think that's such a good idea, Argrave said plainly. Why would we care what you think? The knight on the right side stepped forward in turn. Argrave held his arms out. Care to find out? He could practically feel the tension of his companions behind him, ready to fight. Argrave himself had all of his will focused on the ring around his finger, ready to conjure something at a moment's notice. The door opened quickly, nearly spurring Argrave to action. He found someone looking up at him, Prince Indune, with his icy blue eyes and manufactured smile. Memories came back, and Argrave might have reacted to them, had there been any fewer people at his back. Indune wore all white, which contrasted starkly with his obsidian hair. It was an elaborate, somewhat ceremonial suit, with tassels of gold on the shoulders and gemstones for buttons. He had long sleeves. It was far from anything used for combat. Argrave studied his hands. 3 rings, no fewer. He looked for necklaces and found one. Assume all 3 rings are enchanted, plus the necklace. Assume he's got plenty of spells on hand, defensive and offensive both. Argrave, Indune clasped his hands together. You ruined my surprise. You. He stared at Argrave's eyes. Orion didn't lie about you. Argrave shrugged. He felt like he could not blink. I don't like surprises. And you're good at ruining things. Indune smiled. You had father's eyes, and now you've ruined that with some freakish things. When a silence set in, he laughed. I kid. So, will you come inside? Argrave was somewhat surprised by the question. Indune didn't ask many questions that left room for refusal. Why don't we take a walk? Argrave suggested. A walk, Indune reiterated, clenching his hands together a bit tighter. It's like standing, but you move your legs and travel elsewhere. Argrave nodded, deliberately incendiary to draw a reaction from Indune. There's an old fountain just outside town. Dried up, but it's a pretty view. Nice place. No one around to hear. This was one justification Argrave had for talking to Indune instead of simply killing him outright from a distance. Though he planned things to be clean. Perhaps a single shot from himself or Guilliman. There might be other casualties. The prince was still in a residential district. If things weren't clean, and Argrave and Annalise start using B-rank spells, coupled with the Royal Knights, people might die. Indune or his Royal Knights might use people. Closer up, he could minimize damage. Despite Argrave's provocations, Indune only stood there, staring. His gaze jumped around. This is that tribal. And your fiancé, Indune noted, eyes landing on Annalise. Order reversed, Durin joked, holding his glaive like a walking stick at his side. His hand hovered near the ebonite axe at his waist. Indune's gaze lingered on Annalise far too long for his comfort, and then jumped back to Argrave. All right, a walk. Indune brushed past Argrave, walking down the street. His 4 royal knights hurried after him, and Argrave watched them for a bit. Indune turned, walking backwards as if taunting Argrave. With a deep breath, they followed. Despite Argrave's paranoia, they simply passed the gate of Kinsend and walked up the hill where the old, decrepit fountain waited. It was a grand, giant bowl that had once been filled with water spawned by magic. Now, it was in disrepair. Indune sat on the edge of it, his 4 royal knights off to the side in loose formation. So, we're here, Argrave called out, standing a decent distance away from Indune as he sat on the edge of the fountain. Indune crossed one leg over the other. I brought your armor, the one Orion had custom made for your companions. Indune shrugged. Unfortunately, my little brother is a bit paranoid, so I can't show it to you. That's nice, said Argrave, caring little in light of the situation. I also sent Orion with a document bearing my magic signature, Indune continued. It petitioned further for legitimization. Yours, namely. You'd be named Prince Argrave of Vaska. Argrave frowned. Seeing that, Indune tilted his head back and smiled. I've caught your attention. Have I? A wind passed through their party, and Argrave said nothing as he thought of what this meant. Usually you hit me before giving me nice things, Argrave noted. Indune crossed his arms. I made a mistake, he said hesitantly. I should not have hit you. Now Argrave was well and truly befuddled. He adjusted his feet, taken aback. He'd never seen Indune so compromising. He hadn't expected to win any ground with this man. All he'd hoped for was a quick end to the battle. From the beginning, I was led about by the nose, Indune disclosed. Both of us were. Argrave frowned. By whom? Indune smiled. Perhaps you've already guessed, he ventured. It all started with her, didn't it? She probably gave me foam's power precisely intending I give it to you. She constantly stoked my anger against you. Yet now, she got heavy-handed. She's been driving me against you since day one, but she got rushed. Ilnor? Argrave frowned. What are you? You know things. You have friends, agents. Mina of Veden. I thought she might be Ilnor's, but I'm certain she's yours. Now, Indune said quickly. You travel from place to place, achieving things that are obscure. Indune tapped his temple. And then it came to me. It might be my sister's not as irreplaceable as she makes herself out to be. It might be. The bat has a predator every bit as skilled as she does. Argrave didn't feel the point Indune was making was as cogent as he sold it to be, but he was stunned enough by the development. Words did not come to him right away. If Ilnor wanted me dead, there's a lot easier ways to do it than by using you, Argrave posited. She wanted to damage me, Indune said. She's always wanted to undermine me. A kinslayer. There are few worse crimes in Vaska. This rebellion. People wouldn't attack me and Derika so brazenly. She must have spurred people in the city to attack, provoke a reaction from my guards. As Indune said it, Argrave thought there might have been some truth to his claims. It was only a nugget of truth amidst misinformation, though. Indune stood up off the fountain and stepped forward. I've been looking for a way to sever from her. The truth is, she offers a valuable service, and she's incredibly wealthy. The information is more important than the wealth. But you. As Indune stepped closer, Argrave maintained a cautious distance. Indune looked briefly incensed, but it faded in a flash. I know you have more than you let on. All I've heard, it's the only way. You have information. Real, valuable information, perhaps beyond even her purview. Indune pointed at him. Mina of Veden. She stole me by your directive, didn't she? After a deep breath, Argrave gave a slow, steady nod. Affirmed, Indune nodded. But even if you're not as great as I suspect, it doesn't matter. Indune shook his head. Ilnor is a problem. She needs to go. And I need competency. When I come to reign. And before it, Indune said with a smile. I traveled covertly, with few guards, to avoid her eyes, Indune explained. One of my knights, an informant. He paused. Well, he's not a problem anymore. Don't worry about the details. The fact is, Argrave. Brother. Indune put both of his hands on his waist. I want you to help me deal with Ilnor. Deal with other obstacles. And then, I want you to help me utterly annihilate this rebellion. In return, Mateth, Jast, and Elbril. Anything you name in the south that's not already promised to my brother, I'll make it yours. Wealth unimaginable. What? Argrave said despite himself. You heard me. Indune nodded. Any land, no matter how large, just not Parban. Felipe has decided it is Orion's, and publicly. Even if father dies. Well, let's not get into that. Why? Argrave furrowed his brows. I need competency. Indune explained heartily. You get things done yourself. It's all I've seen. You went from some skinny, malnourished youth to a B-rank mage and newly praised hero. When I succeed, father, I need a new generation of power to build. A new elite as my pillars. Argrave crossed his arms. What would happen? Well. Indune turned around, deliberating. We would return to Daruka. Deal with pressing matters I mentioned earlier. There'd be a ceremony to welcome you as a prince. I'd establish you in a position of power, father's close counsel, for instance, and once spring comes, we'd end the rebels. I see, Argrave noted. Your companions would be well treated, Indune assured. Orion suggested the tribal be named your first royal knight. I have no objections to that. And your fiancée? She should stay in the capital, become intimately acquainted with the family. Perhaps a period of 6 months. Intimately acquainted? Argrave smiled broadly, taking a step forth. 6 months. As Argrave drew near, he was acutely aware that he was larger than Indune. You wed an elf, brother. This is something that will take time. She must be introduced to father. The court. Everyone, Indune explained. Argrave laughed out his nose, a big smile on his face. No. This is just another form of control, another form of threat. You can't trust me, can't surrender one iota of power over me. Yeah, you had me for a minute. I thought, what the hell? Does he deserve a quick death instead of a slow one? Indune gazed up at Argrave. You've gotten bold, brother. A little, Argrave concurred. Do you understand your situation? With those words, the royal knights moved to support Indune. These men are royal knights. Argrave stepped forward. I know them. Many of Orion's knights died fighting things I killed. For the first time, Indune stepped back. Argrave held both his hands out and conjured, Pavi's Gale, on either side. The 2 mage royal knights pushed Indune back and conjured wards in the same motion, and the gargantuan rectangle shields of wind bashed against a golden ward, sending air bouncing in all directions wildly. A noise split the air, and a bolt of fire traveled towards Indune. It was an enchanted arrow, fired by Guilliman. Indune looked liable to be struck, but he conjured his own ward almost lazily, and it bounced off. I brought 2 sets of armor here, one too big for any of those present. You think I'd gloss over the fact you had a man lurking? Indune shouted over the ward. Doesn't matter, Argrave returned, his conjured knights still pushing and cracking the wards. I get things done myself, as you said. Argrave triggered the blessing of supersession. Chapter 214, A Prince's Arbiter. 5 B-rank mages versus 2. It was an overwhelming disadvantage, if viewed without knowledge of who they were. In reality, there was a reason Argrave had confidence enough to talk to Indune. With the power of the blessing of supersession welling within his being, he lapsed into his strategy as though it were a habit. 4 royal knights and Indune stood before him. He loosed Pavi's Gale, time and time again from his hands and Garm's eyes both, preparing electric heels, intermittently. The titanic conjured knights slammed their shields of wind into B-rank wards, chipping them away as quickly as they were placed. Argrave's Brumasiners remained at his legs to defend him in case of stray spells. The rampant display of power left the royal knights only one option, a frantic defense. Even Indune, reckless as he was, remained safely behind their wards. They thought to outlast him. It was standard for fighting mages. Most B-rank mages could only cast just a few B-rank spells before being drained. That wasn't an option for them, though. More and more eels joined up in the sky, sparking, waiting for an opening. Durin joined in, dropping his glaive and hacking with the ebony axe to aid in tearing down the wards before them. Eventually, they broke past the rightward knight's ward, and a Pavis struck the golden-armored man squarely in the shoulder. He took to the air towards Kinzend, flying away dozens of feet while half-spinning from the power of the blow. Guilliman, who jumped down from the walls of Kinzend, fired an arrow at this knight when he landed, yet Argrave could not tell if it hit. Indune shouted a command, and in a few seconds the strategy shifted. The royal knights pressed forwards with their wards, pushing Argrave back slightly so they could not draw near. When one ward broke, a knight pushed past with it, conjuring 2 blades of blood magic, the C-rank, Putrid Paramirian. He thrust both towards Argrave as fast as Guilliman might have. Mist warriors conjured by his Brumasiners rose to defend him. Durin swung the ebony axe down before the mist warriors could do anything, catching one blade with the beard of axe. It dissipated in seconds before the magic-breaking axe. The knight was surprised the weapon could contest his own, but all too quickly grabbed Durin's arm with his now free hand. The other blade stabbed towards his back. Yet Annalise had not been twiddling her thumbs behind them. She cast the C-rank, Sky Sunder, and a bolt of white lightning struck the knight squarely on the chest. Durin winced as the lightning traveled into him, but he was not as severely affected as the knight. After disentangling, Durin pushed the spasming knight away, and Argrave finally rained dozens of electric heels on the man. To finish him, Argrave cast one more, Pavi's Gale. The tower shield swung by the knight struck his foe squarely in the breastplate, caving it in and sending the knight far away from the fight. In a moment of laxness, Indune stepped forth. A guillotine blade of ice formed before the prince far too quickly, likely conjured by an enchanted ring, and hurtled towards Argrave. Annalise stepped beside Argrave and conjured a ward to block it, yet the spell was powerful enough to shatter the ward in one blow. Though exposed, Argrave only tried to punish Indune for his overextension. His eels in the sky came down, but Indune retreated, replaced by B-rank wards conjured by his knights. Argrave abandoned the attack, and the eels danced gracefully backwards like a splash upon the surface of water without striking the ward. Argrave suspected the only reason his foes had not fallen was because they used enchanted items to conjure their wards. They were faster and more numerous. Even still, he trusted in the blessing of supersession more than their enchanted items. Argrave resumed his unrelenting assault once more. He felt like a commander of giants and a leader of titans as the countless knights of wind assailed his foes with earth-shattering blows. He was a Roman commander amidst his legion, each and all battering against a foe that desperately clung to safety. And above it all, like a cloud of divine judgment, his eels grew in numbers by every passing second. He barely heard an ordered series of whistles. Argrave saw the knight that had been blasted towards Kinsend running behind Indune and continuing past him, heeding that command. He would be retreating, looking for allies. It's fine, Argrave thought. Let him run. Annalise made sure there were no forces for miles. One of his knights is dead or dying, the other is retreating. Fewer foes to contest. The assault was noisy and eye-catching, and the residents of Kinsend came to the walls to watch this happen. He could not hide what was about to happen from the world. Countless pointed to the eels above Argrave, and yet more watched the relentless battering of conjured knights, blowing winds across the plains of wintry grass and disturbing the very earth. Despite the relentlessness of Argrave's assault, his opponent's desperation was no less intense. Even with Darrenading with the Ebon Ice Axe, his foes seemed to have an unending supply of wards to block his spells. They were better equipped, without a doubt. He felt like a hammer striking down on an anvil. As time passed, Argrave felt some urgency. Glimmer rejoined them, taking the Ebon Ice Axe from Darren and increasing the efficiency of the attack. Those trained, their foes refused to fall. He could see Indune desperately struggling to hold back the tide, both casting spells and using the enchanted items he wore on his person alongside his knights. And then, the blessing ended. Great howling winds moved across the plains as the effect of the numerous, Pavi's gales, faded. Argrave stood there, his hands held out as Indune waited behind a shield of gold, breathing heavy with panic. He slowly rose to his feet, and he and Argrave locked eyes. "Defend me," Argrave said loudly yet evenly. It felt unnecessary, for his companions and his Brumasoners were already doing that. In time with his command, their electric eels in the skies came to blanket them, swirling about through the air. They were like divers in the midst of an ocean surrounded by a school of swimming fish. As they were umbrellaed by the eels, the place grew all the brighter. The fountain and grassy hills were illuminated by bright blue light. Argrave held his hand out and cast a spell with his own magic. Two thick strands of blood erupted from his wrist. They took form in his hands, solidifying into a great recurve bow as tall as Argrave himself. He raised his other hand up, and an arrow took shape. He knocked the arrow for his blood-flood bow. Indune could only wait on the other side of the ward. The thousands of electric eels, swirling about around Argrave and a whole battlefield like some grim curtain of white death. He barked something, commands, questions, to his knights. He looked around panicked for any opportunity, any escape, any freedom. But escape was out of the question. Argrave would rain lightning upon them the second they were freed from the ward. As Indune looked for options, the dark red arrow on Argrave's finger grew larger and larger. The pain kept Argrave focused. Eventually, Argrave met Indune's eyes. He had never seen this type of expression before. It was panic, anger, indignance, fear, all bundled so tightly together as to become another emotion altogether. The prince was tense, coiled like a rabbit ready to bolt. His eyes were pleading, almost, painted yellow by the golden wards he hid behind. The eels swelled outwards, then surged inwards towards the ball of golden light protecting Indune. As they passed by Argrave, he released the arrow. The scene ahead became a great blur of power, shattered golden wards, and white light. The electric eels struck the royal knights in the hundreds, turning them into sparking beacons. Dirt and grass scattered upwards and everywhere, as though a missile had struck the earth. "If he's not dead, cut his hands off, take his necklace," Argrave said somberly, knowing Glimmer would hear. It was not cruelty. He had to restrain Indune, for he was a spellcaster. Glimmer obeyed immediately, pushing into the great cloud of dust. Argrave could hear nothing at all. Dirt and grass peppered him from above. As the dust settled, there was a great gash in the earth ahead that extended for hundreds of feet. Indune stood at its beginning. The arrow of blood had struck the prince in the thigh, and his right leg had been severed just below his hip. He seemed to be unconscious, as Glimmer ruthlessly obeyed Argrave's orders, though. The prince awoke, screaming in agony. Argrave stepped up to Indune, past his two dead royal knights. He was dizzy from using blood-flood bow, but compared to his first use, it was entirely manageable. Hundreds of the eels still persisted, whirling in the air around Argrave as he walked. Indune gazed up at him with eyes full of hate, pain, and fear. Argrave scanned his body for enchanted items, ensuring he was at no risk. "Search the bodies," Argrave commanded loudly. "Take all of their enchanted items, barring the armor. We can't carry that." After, move to the gates of King's End. Everyone moved to obey Argrave's order without a word, still consumed by the rush of battle. Indune breathed heavily, his eyes fluttering as he struggled with consciousness. Death hung over him. Argrave picked up Indune's detached hand and began removing the rings from it, stowing it in his pocket. Indune tried to crawl backwards into the crater created by their blood-fed bow, but Argrave put his foot on Indune's chest. "You," Indune said, voice hoarse and pained. "You're no brother of mine. You were useless, a waste of life." He tried to shout, yet it was weak. "You're not my brother." Argrave cast a simple D-rank ice spell that was no more than a spike and jammed it into Indune's eye. It penetrated deep, well beyond the eye and into the brain beyond. The prince spasmed, his body losing focus, and then he sagged back. Argrave pressed his foot against the back of the ice spike, pushing it deeper until it came out the back of his head, with a hole the size of a fist through his brain. Indune was dead. There was no room for doubt. Argrave removed all the enchanted rings from Indune's hands, and then moved back to his companions. They robbed the dead as quick as they could, and then moved for the gate. "Get the armor from Ryan as fast as we can." "If Indune wasn't just lying," Argrave said to his companions as they moved. "If people try and stop us, subdue them. Don't kill anyone." "Right," Durin answered, everyone else responding similarly. Argrave shouted warnings and assurances, and that was enough to cow the terrified crowd. They treated the four of them like calamities, doubly so because of the cloud of electric eels above Argrave. Yet the fact remained that everyone saw them, each of them. In time, this event would spread across all of Vaska. "Let it," thought Argrave. "Indune is hated." Though Argrave took his time, weakened from casting blood-fed bow, they made it to the building Indune had been in. The two sets of armor were sitting on a stand within the room. Glimmer's was a set of bleak grey plate armor that shone with protective enchantments on every portion. It seemed ridiculously thick and heavy, yet its prowess could not be questioned. After tossing aside the helmet, knowing his own was better, Glimmer started putting everything on, aided by Argrave. Durin's was a set of lighter lamella scale armor. It was still made of wyvern scales, to Argrave's surprise. He had not known Durin had requested it to be as such. It looked quite formidable, gleaming every bit as intensely as Gilliman's. Durin put it on with Annalisa's help. "Don't see the weapons I asked for." "Damn," cursed the tribal. "Do we change our course, travel elsewhere?" Durin questioned as they armored up. "Dozens of S-rank mages enforce the neutrality in the Tower of the Grey Owl," Argrave said. "Felipe can't afford making them an enemy, even for his son's killer. If we get in before news reaches, they'll protect us, even if dozens of mages break their oath of neutrality to earn favor with the king." Argrave stepped to the window, looking at the tower. "So, we travel without sleep, ride our horses till they die." "What about getting out?" Annalise asked. "The king will surely have the place encircled on every side. He'll ensure there is no way for us to leave." "Magic," Argrave said. "I'll have to curry favor with some people, Castro being the primary candidate. But others exist." "Are you okay?" Annalise said with concern as she finished up with Durin's armor. He looked back at her. He was trying not to think of what he'd done. "I can figure that out later," he said simply. "For now, let's go. This will have consequences. I'd like to get ahead of them." Chapter 215, Unexpected Guest. Argrave fled from King's End as fast as the horses would carry them. The scouting they did was less detailed than usual in their haste. It would be more important to make it to the Tower of the Grey Owl than it would be to dodge potential ambushes, and much of the area ahead was simply a vast plain that required no scouting. But the tower was not so far, fortunately. As they grew nearer, it loomed over their head more and more, like a great grey rod planted in the ground by the gods. Even from a great distance, Argrave could see the sparking enchantments holding such a titanic piece of architecture upright, the magic grappling with both the fast winds at high altitudes and the great weight of the tower itself. There were stables a fair distance away from the tower. Argrave and his companions moved their horses near them, the creatures panting with exhaustion. They had very nearly ridden them to death. Once there, Argrave dismounted, legs stiff and unwieldy after the breakneck ride. "You there," Argrave told a stable worker. "Take care of our horses. Just remember my face. Give our horses back when we leave," he said, handing the boy 5 gold coins. 5 more when we return," he promised. He didn't know if they'd leave by horseback, though. The boy nodded quickly, seemingly terrified of Argrave. With that, they removed their luggage from their spot atop the horses and left, heading to the entrance of the tower. Argrave felt an urge to sprint. "Can they enter without badges?" asked Annalise, referring to Gilliman and Durin. "As I recall, these places have magical restriction for those without them. First couple floors have stupidly expensive temporary lodgings. Yeah, nobility study here, some of them bring servants, retinues of knights. The order makes money by charging hefty rent, Argrave nodded. Beyond those first floors, number. The restriction will kick in once Argrave's foot met the stone of the tower. He took a deep breath and exhaled. Christ. We made it. Most terrifying horseback ride of my life. Or maybe it was the first one, Argrave conceded. What now? Questioned Guilliman, directing their attention back to the important matters. Now. Argrave nodded, recalling what he had planned. Now, we head to the 4th floor, get you two registered for temporary lodging, establish the purpose of our visit. From there, I don't know how long we'll stay. Ideally, it'll be a very short time. Realistically, I'm not sure how easy Castro will be able to win over. If that fails, we might have to turn to another S-rank mage for aid, which would take. I don't know. Argrave shook his head, exhausted. Already, people were staring at them from their eye-catching appearance alone. Once news of Indune's death reached here, he was sure they'd be the center of attention. He'd probably be doing no favors for his reputation in the Order of the Grey Owl by blatantly abusing their policy of neutrality, but he didn't especially care. He'd be paying them back for this favor in time. Let's go, then, Argrave nodded, steeling himself. He felt like a lion among sheep. He'd just killed the prince, and now he was preparing himself to have a pleasant conversation with a receptionist. Yes, as he walked, he noticed someone distinctly moving towards him. At first, his frayed nerves made him interpret the action in a negative light. As the person grew closer, however, his paranoia morphed into surprise. Elias of House Parbon approached Argrave. Argrave stared at his waxbox-scarred eye in shock, yet the heir to the Margravate of House Parbon was smiling. And here I thought Stain would be wasting all of our time, Elias said. Argrave. He paused. Your eyes. My father told me about it, but I didn't think that. I suppose seeing is believing. Argrave recovered from his shock quickly. Yeah, it seems we both had some changes on that front. What the hell are you doing here? Elias' finger brushed just beneath his eye. Don't worry about this. I made a mistake, that's the bottom line. He studied Argrave's party. Nicoletta and Mina are both here, as well. What? Argrave's brows furrowed. What's going on? We have to talk about the future, Elias said plainly. My father sent me here to talk to you. Nicoletta's father, too. And Mina. It was a coincidence we met up at all. Argrave shifted on his feet and looked back to Annalise. She nodded, confirming Elias' sincerity. He crossed his arms and looked back to Elias. I just recently had a talk about the future. It ended very poorly for the other party. Elias frowned, not catching Argrave's meaning. Is that no, just a stupid joke. Argrave shook his head. I mean, Christ, you caught me at a poor time. We didn't think to catch you at all, Elias admitted. Stain said he heard rumors you broke into the B rank and predicted you might head to the tower to seek advancement into a high wizard. Argrave scratched the bottom of his chin, embarrassed he had been so easily predicted. At the same time, he thought of an opportunity. By any chance, are you staying in a temporary lodging? Yes, Elias nodded, perplexed. We have guards with us, so it was necessary. Why? Argrave smiled. I'll talk only if we can stay with you. The lodging is stupidly expensive. As long as you answer us honestly. Done. Elias confirmed. You may regret that, Argrave cautioned. Prince Levin strode through the vast greenery of Princess Eleanor's greenhouse, admiring the vibrancy of the garden. Or at least, so it seemed, though his face smiled, his eyes seemed almost bored. As he wandered, he eventually made it into the central square, where a great fountain dominated the center. He stepped past small streams that flowed out of the water show, walking towards a pink metal table just beside it. Princess Eleanor sat there, wearing green just as ever. She heard his steps and faced him as he walked. Hello, sister, Levin greeted. Levin, she returned passively. Levin took a deep breath. It always surprises me that you recognize my voice, considering how infrequently we speak. Eleanor said nothing. Levin pulled back a chair and sat without asking. I take it you will not be attending Magna's funeral? Levin began, setting his hands upon the table. The fountain continued to babble and bugs in the greenhouse chirped as both of them let the silence hang. I cannot leave the greenhouse, Eleanor finally said. Levin nodded. Also father decreed. She smiled pleasantly. I imagine Magna's murderer will not be attending, as well. The prince laughed and smiled in kind. Have you not heard? Orion killed his murderer. So he claims. Anyway, who am I to doubt him? I was not there. He died by strange magic foreign to Veska. But I will be going, if that's what you were asking. I arranged the event, after all. He said that he arranged the event with such pride the phrase took on double meanings. Eleanor tilted her head, eyeless sockets seeming to gaze into Levin's soul. Magnus went to the wetlands to discover why the plague was spreading so fast in the south, you know. And such a queer thing, Levin said, leaning back in his chair. Our selfish brother does something entirely selfless, for reasons I could not begin to guess. If only he'd told someone what he'd discovered before he died, Eleanor mused. That someone might inform me, and I might know. Levin smiled, but it was bitter. If only. He took a deep breath and sighed, then leaned in and placed his elbows on the pink table. So many tragedies and near tragedies to those close to you. Are they not close to you? Eleanor raised a brow. Levin shrugged. Well, who can say? But I do wonder why my sister expends so much effort to bring Argrave and Indian closer. Who can say? She parroted. Levin turned his head to the side, admiring the fountain as it poured. It is simply vexing as to why you go to such lengths for a base-born. So many cards used, favors called. Maybe all the favors you've made, trapped here in this greenhouse. Maybe, she conceded. Something in the air tells me that I may be called upon for my funerary services sometime soon. Levin pondered as he admired more of the greenhouse. Orion was rather fond of Argrave. I'm sure he'll be devastated by the news. He may do something foolish. How unfortunate. Ilnor simply faced forward, remaining quiet. Levin turned his gaze to her missing eyes. He did not seem to be appalled in the slightest. A person is driven by needs and wants, Levin posited. Safety and succor are foremost among those needs. Men and women will do anything for both. Yet wants, they determine all else. Once safety is obtained, people dedicate all of their time to their desires. If you know what someone wants, you know how to make them move. People might seek empty pleasures. They might seek fulfillment. Ilnor crossed her arms. An interesting theory. Levin nodded. I am wondering who might want Argrave dead. You generally dispose of the bastards of the family, Ilnor pointed out. Well, I was quite young when Argrave was born. Levin shook his head regretfully. And Felipe forbid it when I was old enough to assume that duty, for reasons I cannot guess. Yet you want to? Ilnor questioned. Not especially, Levin said ponderously. Not any more than anyone else, I suppose. What do you want, Levin? The princess finally asked outright. Levin smiled. It seemed to be his first genuine smile. Now that is the age-old question. If you knew what I wanted, you might be able to make me move, as you've made so many others. I'd be in your web, or your bat's nest. I can't think of a good metaphor for bats, tragically. Levin leaned forth. I'll tell you what I want. I want to know what you want, dear sister. Well, you'll need to persuade me to tell you, Ilnor said casually. See, you get it. You know what I want, and now you're trying to make me move as you wish. Levin shook his head. You were always bright. I question how someone as smart as you ended up blinded and crippled by father, locked up in this elaborate cage. Oh, but then, father didn't do the deed personally, did he? A certain special someone did. Levin's smile was cruel enough to move people to tears. Princess Ilnor said nothing in response. At her non-reaction, Levin looked sorely disappointed. He looked off to the side, then said, by all rights, you're the weakest in the family. Blind, no feet, no magic to your name, no swords at your side. Yet sometimes I wonder if you're more dangerous than me. Than anyone. Ilnor leaned back in her wheelchair. Such a thing to say. You could kill me right now, brother. Levin leaned in. I wonder, he said, looking around. I must be going now. We both have each other's weakness, so things will continue on as they are for time eternal. I do wonder how long that eternity will last, though. Allegiances are changing like the weather, and the royal family dips in number day after day. Oh, provided Archduke Regine stays asleep. Of course. Levin walked away quietly. Ilnor's eyeless sockets seemed to follow him, watching as he left. You are slower to hear than I am, it seems, she whispered, half to herself. Her face had the slightest of smiles. The jackal surprises once more. A legion of ghostly snakes. Chapter 216, Declaration of Spring. Argrave stepped through the door, mindful to duck beneath the door frames now that he'd returned to the Tower of the Grey Owl after all these months. Within, numerous recognizable people waited for him alongside a large retinue of knights. Mina and Nicoletta sat near each other, but there was an awkward air between them. Stain sat by the windowsill. Elias walked to a table in the center of the room, standing before it with his hands hovering just above the wood-crowded place. Not enough for a party, Argrave noted as his companions filtered in behind him. Are you sure we can stay here? And I mean physically. Mina and Nicoletta have a room next door. Elias nodded. Ah, said Argrave, looking at them pointedly. Both of them frowned, though one for different reasons. Nicoletta seemed discomforted by his eyes. You've changed a lot, I see, cousin. Heard that plenty, he nodded. We can talk about it later. To business, Argrave ordered. Well, Elias began, taken off balance by the speed of the conversation. Eventually, he nodded in agreement, his one good eye fixing on Argrave. Yes. To the point, then. It would probably be best to lay it out plainly. Elias cleared his throat. We'd like you to fight at our side in the war against King Felipe. Not as a commander or common spellcaster, as a claimant. Our claimant, to Dirica and all the lands of Vaska. The words were somewhat surreal, so Argrave did not have a visceral reaction. He looked back to Annalise, and she smiled bitterly. Darren nodded intensely just behind her to encourage Argrave, while Gilliman merely kept his eyes on the Knights of the Margravate throughout the room. Your father isn't blowing steam at the mention of my name? Argrave turned back. My father thinks you succeeded at stopping the spread of the plague, Elias returned. And Mina corroborates that. So do I, Stain finally interjected. People walking from the northwest are singing about you, Argrave. With a shrug, Argrave made his way to a chair and pulled it up to the table Elias stood before. He sat. Orion did most of the work. His gaze wandered to Nicoletta. Claimant, make her do it. I refused. I don't want it. Besides, I am a woman, and that alone would stifle support. Nicoletta shook her head. I only wish for peace and prosperity in Mateth. I am not made for dealing with court intrigues and management of a vast land. Acting as regent for my father alone stressed me beyond compare. To go beyond that in scale, I would rather not. Argrave rubbed his forehead. What in the hell? Why would you think this is a good idea? Your actions the past few months have been tremendous, Elias told him plainly. Going to Vaiden, allying us with Just, stopping the plague. And from what you told Nicoletta, it seems you know of a lot of future tragedies. You will be hailed as a hero by the people, and the people, they're what's important. Argrave placed Indune's royal signet ring on the table. It depicted Vasca's heraldry, a sword, with twin snakes coiled around it. I killed Indune, you know. The room went quiet. Everyone studied him and the ring as though he was joking. You heard me, Argrave continued. Kinsend. He was waiting for me. The ironic name for the town, I suppose, or maybe it was fate. Tried to name me Prince Argrave of Vasca, offer me great stretches of southern land. Once Indune tried to suggest keeping Annalise hostage. Negotiations broke down. That was the breaking point, but I killed him for various good reasons, Argrave summarized shortly. Everyone stared at him in pure shock. Argrave couldn't fully describe the emotion he was feeling. He felt pride in his accomplishment supplanted by guilt at that pride. He felt relief at Indune's death coupled with fear at possible reprisal. He felt both hopeful and deeply uncertain of the future. All of it melded together to create a strange, careless apathy. Argrave looked from person to person. I imagine the enthusiasm of your offer has dulled somewhat. King Kinslayer is not as appealing a prospect as the heroic bastard, protector of the weak. Nicoletta stood and walked forward to him. You killed him? When Argrave nodded, she continued, you, personally, you used no proxy, like a higher-ranked mage, a military force. I jabbed a nice spike through his eye about a foot long, Argrave described succinctly. After some magical dueling, Nicoletta put her hand on Argrave's shoulder to support herself from falling. Gods above. I need. One of her knights came over and helped her to find a seat. How many? I mean, who saw this? Mina asked, aghast. Few hundred people. A royal knight escaped. Indune sent him for reinforcements. I imagine word will spread very quickly. That's why I came here. Argrave spread his arms out. Wasn't he? I mean, I heard Indune was not weak at all. Stain noted from the windowsill. Gods be damned. World's a better place without him sucking air. Argrave crossed his arms. I saw an opportunity. I took it. Indune deliberately orphaned children for pleasure, he said loudly and deliberately. Frankly, he got off easy. And you should be so lucky, Elias said, his voice urgent. If Felipe catches you, you won't get off easy at all. All the more reason we should hurry. The Margrave sent us to bring you back, so come back. We can protect you. Moreover, Duke Enrico is prepared to allow. Do not mention that, Nicoletta cut in. We are trying to persuade, Elias. Recall what triggered Indune's demise. Right, Elias nodded, then stroked his chin briefly. Argrave was perplexed at their exchange, but he could not ask before Elias continued. The South is prepared to utilize every force at our disposal to safeguard you. So come with us, Argrave. Argrave put his finger to his lips. I like the sound of dozens of S-rank mages better than Parban Margravate. Tempting, but I think not. The tower? You'll stay here? Elias sought to confirm. King Felipe will have this place encircled, and he'll demand you be given to him. He won't. At least, I'm relatively sure he won't attack the tower, but you won't be able to leave. You think I did this on a whim? Argrave looked to him. I wasn't expecting to meet any of you. I have a plan. If it falls through, I have other plans. And besides, going to Parban once again is not in my calendar. You do owe me a favor still, Argrave, Mina pointed out. A big one. And I surely won't forget that fact. Elias put his hand on his hip and stared down at Argrave. So, you refuse our offer. You won't act as claimant. Won't even consider it. When did I say that? Relax, both of you. Argrave looked between Mina and Elias. Give me a moment to think. As Argrave sat there in contemplation, Elias walked away, everyone still reeling from the news of Indune's death. Annalise put her hand on Argrave's shoulder, and he looked up. He put his hand atop her own and returned the resigned smile she flashed him. The two of them had already talked about this at length. And the conclusion? When spring comes, when the fighting begins in earnest, I will be your claimant, Argrave finally said. Provided my status as a kinslayer doesn't make the Margrave rethink things. Elias stepped back up to Argrave, his one good ruby eye fixed on Argrave. You speak seriously? No lies? On my terms. Argrave put a finger to his chest. Nicoletta, how much did you gab about Girectic Kiet? She looked up from where she sat. I told my father. It spread to the Margrave, and to Elias. Once things get worse, a title like king or queen has a hell of a lot less meaning. It'll be a desperate struggle for just about everyone, Argrave informed them, gaze distant. If only for the sake of stability after the war, I'll do it. I can't promise I won't abdicate when it suits me. That's... Elias bit his lip. Hey, Argrave pointed to Elias. You have no idea the magnitude of problems that we face. The Civil War is just one medium-sized checkbox on my list of shit that's wrong with the world. Argrave tapped his finger against the table. I'll fix this kingdom. I'll make sure it stays fixed. I'll utilize my status to the best of my ability to stop the world from turning upside down. But when all is said and done, Argrave threw up his hands. I can barely comprehend being a king. I can think of 100 better candidates. I won't deny wealth and power are enticing, but after all the things I've been through, peace and happiness rank a lot higher in my hopes for the future. A king, a good king, which I'm sure you want. That's a busy job. Early retirement sounds peachy to me. Elias seemed cowed by Argrave's intensity. After he shifted on his feet a few times, he gave a slow nod. All right, Argrave repeated, finally relaxing. It might not matter anyway, Elias noted tiredly. Odds are stacked against us. Most of the south was ravaged by plague. A lot of our fighting force died out, and though the harvest went smoothly, saboteurs burn granaries and assassins attack local lords constantly. It's become a struggle to persuade undecided nobility, while Vaska does not have the same issue at all. Argrave waved his hand half-heartedly. We'll win, but I'm starving, he noted. Do they have food here? We'll win? On what basis? Nicoletta demanded, standing from her chair and stepping up. Relax, Argrave held his hand out. I told you I have a plan. I want to know why you're confident, Nicoletta insisted, crossing her arms. It's past time for you to include us in this. I trust Mina to keep quiet, but you expect me to spill my guts about military plans to people notoriously terrible at keeping secrets? In front of half a dozen knights, all of whom may be enemy informants, no less? Argrave scowled, then rose up until he stood over everyone. You learn a lot risking your life day by day, foremost among those lessons being caution. I expect you to save your indignance for a better time, Nicoletta. Nicoletta stepped back from Argrave, not able to meet his eyes. I'm sorry, she said. Argrave pushed his tongue against his cheek, now where he was being unnecessarily intimidating. Don't apologize, he patted her shoulder. I get your perspective. You're gambling a lot, all of you, he said heartily. Some bastard turned kinslayer being your only hope. I can see why you might want a lot of assurances. So let me give you some, Argrave said, mind pushing past his fatigue as he worked out a speech. I won't go into specifics, for the sake of ensuring they fall through, Argrave declared, gaze jumping from person to person. But there are forces within Vaska that lay untapped, forces which surpass all of what the enemy's got. I know the inner workings of many factions within and without this kingdom. You want assurances? That's good. Then know this, I want a quick end to this war. I turned down in June, killed him and 4 of his royal knights in single combat. That should tell you what I think of Vaska's chances. Argrave pointed around the room. When spring comes, I'll bring a spring of my own. A new beginning, fresh buds that'll make the south and all Vaska flourish like never before. Some people you called enemy yesterday. When I return, they'll be at my back. Argrave pumped his fist. The rot within Vaska's leadership. I'll make it fester, so you can focus on building an army. Elias, Mina, Nicoletta, and you can keep it. I don't need it. I'll bring an army of my own. And I can damn well guarantee you it'll be bigger and better. So rest easy. I certainly am, Argrave finished, taking a good look at everyone's reactions. Missed my calling, Argrave concluded. Went to college, should have just been a motivational speaker. On that note, I'm tired, I'm hungry, and I've got things to do. Argrave rubbed his eyes. So, are we done? No answer was vocalized, but then Argrave supposed that was answer enough. Chapter 217, Golden Ticket. What do you think? Argrave questioned Annalise. The two of them sat on rather comfortable chairs just before a table. Despite the safety of the tower, neither removed their enchanted armor. The tower was safe, but it was still better to be overcautious. They were in a private room, warded to block sound, commonplace in the tower. Annalise crossed one leg over the other. Of the tower? She asked, and when Argrave nodded to confirm, she said, it is a bit ostentatious, if I'm honest. Got that right. It's no coincidence it's in the middle of a plain. It's a big, useless monument to pride. I think Castro would agree. You met him before. Now that I think back, Argrave settled into his chair, then sighed. Endune's dead. You feel relieved, she said, a statement, not a question. Yeah, Argrave said, voice distant. The provisional route I made at the beginning of? Whatever the hell you call my presence in this realm, it's veered quite far off course. And now, I'm planning to take us further from it. I will help as best I can, Annalise only assured him. How are you handling these developments? Argrave asked her. Annalise shifted in her chair uncomfortably. I have been trying to focus myself on this place, this tower, and what might be within. I suppose that should tell you enough. I am nervous. I am afraid we have angered something very powerful. Argrave snorted. Hearing you're curious about this place just tells me you're the same person at root. He looked to her. But forget about who we've angered. Endune's death wasn't a crime of passion. It was a great damned opportunity. King Felipe's angry. I'm a kinslayer. All of these consequences pale in comparison to the good that one act did, pragmatically and morally. I never said I doubted your actions, Annalise soothed. I know you didn't. I said it half to myself, honestly. But Argrave adjusted his sleeve. Hearing him make that suggestion about your future, that got under my skin like nothing else. If I could have made him. The door to the room opened, cutting Argrave off. A short man with a straight back and a wrinkled, almost leathery bald head entered. He seemed kind and harmless. He looked far too small to threaten or intimidate, and the amiable smile practically writ on his face spoke to his kindness. Calling him kind was true enough, but Castro was light years away from being harmless. Argrave rose to his feet at once. Tower Master Castro, he said eagerly. Thought we'd be waiting longer, planned for a long conversation with Annalise. Ah. His eyes jumped between the two of them. I'm Argrave. He put his hand to his chest. We spoke at. Did you think I'd forgotten? Castro interrupted, then stepped a bit closer after he shut the door. No, I was simply deeply awed by your progress, both of you. My memory is not perfect, but your improvements seem utterly tremendous. Castro's words had an intense sincerity to them that practically forced both to smile. The fact he was happy eased Argrave. It likely meant he had not heard of Indune's fate quite yet, nor had the rest of the tower. He stepped up to Argrave, his smile faltering. Your eyes, though, reminiscent of certain products from certain schools of necromancy, Order of the Rosera creatures. Large portions of both soul and magic power crystallize in the eye, preventing decay while retaining sight. The crystallized soul is the gold color, while the blackness is the magic. It was Argrave's turn to be awed when Castro so quickly identified the source of his eyes. Well, that's not why we're here, Argrave redirected, trying not to act nervous. Necromancy is illegal. I won't insult you by implying you don't know that, Castro said, raising one finger above his head until he tapped Argrave's chest. But beyond that, I would not like to see such promising growth sullied by, you know an awful lot about necromancy. Can pinpoint exact details, Argrave noted. Castro pulled his finger back. I am a curious person, and I enjoy learning. Well, I'd consider myself the same. But for the record, these, Argrave pointed to his eyes. These are from surgery and alchemy, not necromancy. Argrave shook his head, then sat back down at the chair. Can we sit, talk? Like I mentioned in the message I sent you, I have more druidic books to upload. Castro nodded, though Argrave couldn't tell if he was quite content. He turned to Annalise. Ah. We meet again, young Lady Annalise. Though your friend here drew my eye. You are no less the achiever, I see. Both of you are well into B rank. Such a thing. Hello again, Master Castro, she greeted with a nod. Both of you have grown. And not merely in terms of magic, that is evident. Castro bobbed his head as he thought of something. Well, I imagine you had other matters to discuss, he said as he sat. Come to milk me more. Another offer to turn a profit? How is business in Just? Argrave smiled. If only I saw a penny of it. He lamented, realizing denying things at this point would just be insolence. Castro did not lead the Order of the Grey Owl because he was powerful alone. He was a shrewd and capable leader, under whom the Order had come to prosper greatly. I'm not particularly pleased at what you've done, illicitly distributing spellbooks through Just. He leaned back into the chair. But, at the end of the day, more members of the Order are learning druidic spells. In time, they will permeate throughout the Order. All is well that ends well. And nothing concrete traces back to you. Or your smuggler friends, there. After all, Elena the Bell might not have recommended Annalise to be an honorary wizard had you not done what you did. That would be a shame indeed, being deprived of a talent. Argrave relaxed back into the chair. You might start unnerving me if you know what we've done in the burnt desert, too. Castro only smiled. It seemed a little less genial, now. Only a little. So, what is it you want from me? Do you wish me to expedite your ascendancy to High Wizards of the Order? I am afraid that is impossible, even for me. We're aware, said Annalise, and we did not come for that. I've got two things I'd like to ask of you, said Argrave. I'd like help with a gift for my sister. I'm going to be visiting her soon, you see, and I can't come empty-handed. And on that note, I'd like a ride to the gift store, and to Dirica. A gift for your sister? Castro looked surprised. That's a sweet sentiment. I'm sure it will be appreciated. But how do I factor into this? Well, the gift store in question is a Rosera living fortress, Argrave disclosed. Plenty of things of archaeological interest, as well as preserved books from the Order of the Rose that might be recovered. That's my offering to you. Argrave held his hands up. But within, there's a little artifact that can help my sister out immeasurably. Castro tapped his finger against the armrest of the chair, staring at Argrave with wonder. And how did you learn of this fortress? Well, I went through the Low Way of the Rose, Argrave explained. Hellish place. Wouldn't wish it on anyone. But I learned a lot, gained a lot, and made some unexpected acquaintances. He left that last part unspoken, mind wandering to calm. Annalise nodded in agreement, and Castro's eyes jumped between the two of them. You have been busy, I see, Castro remarked. Well, certainly I can organize a team, have them come with you to this. I was hoping it would be you, personally. Argrave leaned forward, trying to appear as earnest as possible. Castro frowned, bushy white brows descending. I cannot. I have pressing matters to attend to here, unfortunately. We were planning on going to Magister Moriatran to ask, next, Argrave said. The man was ostensibly Castro's largest rival, a counselor on the ruling body of the Order of the Grey Owl who opposed him frequently. That one? Well, that is an entertaining notion, young man. Do you suppose he will even agree to meet you? Castro laughed, then scratched his cheek. I do not say I have matters to attend to for the sake of dodging this request. I am genuinely busy. My duties are light as the tower master, and this tower mostly runs itself. But I do still have duties. What if I give you other locations? Argrave insisted, leaning yet more forward till he nearly fell off the chair. I can tell you places, Argrave. Annalise cut in. When he looked at her, she shook her head to indicate it was hopeless. Argrave slumped back into the chair, finally admitting defeat. I am sorry, truly. Living fortresses are few and far between, and I would jump at the opportunity if I did not have other concerns. Alas, the trappings of power. Castro scratched the back of his neck. I am told the Margrave sautéed from the tower for the plague by your advice, Castro noted. And I've heard other whispers, too, from the northwest. I am not ignorant of the good you've done, and you have earned something. Castro smiled, then pointed. Speaking of the good you've done, you've yet to receive your reward for the dissertation on blood infusion you submitted. I can't think of much I want from the order they'd be willing to part with. Argrave shook his head. But listen, if you can't help me, can you at least make it easier for me to meet with the other S-rank mages in the tower? The magisters, the researchers. Castro laid his hands on the armrests. My word to Moriatran may make it more difficult to meet him. But yes to all the others. I will think of something. It is the least I can do. Why are you so insistent on being escorted by an S-rank mage, though? Convenience, ease, reliability, Argrave said succinctly. Less variables to keep track of. One person to keep happy, and nothing more. It takes a certain insanity to become S-rank, Castro said bluntly. Be careful who you choose, young man. I know, Argrave nodded. That's why I wanted you. Well, Master Castro, Annalise cut in. The enchantments that keep this tower upright, they must be something very special. They are, Castro indulged patiently. Do you think I might learn about them? How they're powered, how they function, the methods used to inscribe them. Oh, and the strange moving platforms in the center of the tower. I am greatly interested by those. Anything you might give to illuminate me would be greatly appreciated. Castro laughed quietly. I can see why you advanced so quickly through the ranks of magic, young lady. Well, certainly, if it's only that, I can give you a pass to the lower levels of the tower, where these things are managed. What you learn there, that's up to you. Annalise nodded eagerly, then fixed her long white hair. I would have it no other way. If that's all. The old man rose to his feet. Have a nice day, Master Castro. Argrave said his goodbyes. The tower master nodded and left through the door. Argrave raised a hand to his face once he left, scratching his cheek with a somber look. Gods be damned, Argrave sighed. Our golden ticket to the blood factory just walked out the door. And we have to find a new one. What's more, they'll have learned of Indune's death. By then, things are going to be difficult. Annalise, I cannot recall when last they were easy, she returned. Argrave laughed, then looked to the window. Almost sunset time. When Annalise smiled at his words, he couldn't help but do the same. She stood. Let us go, then. Relax. Speak of things alone for precious few moments. She held out her hand to help him up. Chapter 218, Shadows. What do we do about this? Elias began. He sat at a table consisting of Nicoletta, Mina, and Stain. Their guards were absent, and they were in a relatively clean room within the tower with little in the way of decoration or even windows, a private room, warded to block all sound. Spellcasters were well educated and engaged in more intrigue than most, so such rooms had a good place within the tower. I think Argrave's right, Mina interjected. Losing Indune. It's a blessing. I can say having worked with him, he's an untrustworthy ally, but a far worse enemy. Nicoletta crossed her arms. You shouldn't have done that for him. It was too dangerous. What does it matter to you what I do? Mina rebuked defensively. Elias Goodeye moved between the two of them, obviously hesitant to touch this quarrel at all. What does this mean for the kingdom? For the future? Stain lifted his leg up and left his foot hanging off one of the table's edges. I can tell you now, Argrave's not going to lose any goodwill from the people that matter. What people are those? Nicoletta pressed, unbothered by his lax nature. The people, Stain finished, pointing two fingers at Nicoletta. Your everyman has been hating the royal family for a long time, and Indune's the face of all that. King Felipe's had him managing things for a while, and all the harsh taxes, all the injustice. Indune made it happen. So, grand scheme of things? Stain shrugged, leaving the answer unspoken. Everyone gave half-hearted nods of agreements. But realistically speaking, Nicoletta cut in, if this is to affect anyone, it is to be the nobility. There, kinslaying holds the most negativity. People that hold stock in blood care more when one is willing to spill the blood of their own kin. There's ways around that, Mina noted. Ultimately, if we get on this ahead of time, influence the direction of rumors. Stain raised his head and fixed his brown hair. What? You could spread rumors that it was self-defense, that Indune intended to kill Argrave. He only acted in self-defense, Mina posited. Sure, and I will. But Stain bit his lip as he deliberated on whether or not to say something. Did he? Quite set in once again. Elias leaned forward on the table and placed his elbows down. I think that's what we should be talking about. Pedantry about who started the fight? Nicoletta asked incredulously. No. Elias shook his head. Is Argrave who he once was? Is he worth supporting? Stain raised his hand. Who he once was seemed the same to me. Scary bastard through and through, a little manipulative, but ultimately a decent guy. Your father made that judgment already, Mr. Firebrand. Mina leaned back in her chair. As far as you told me, you're just here to bring him back. We've already got his answer. I'll do what I want, though in more words. Nicoletta looked troubled. Argrave is different, whether physically, or the way he talked. He is not what I remember. At core he remains recognizable, but he has a whole different air, attitude, and appearance. Elias nodded in agreement. But these changes, they might not be negative. Everyone considered that for a moment, looking between each other. My father doesn't want to put a puppet on the throne. He's told me as much himself. Argrave is firm, decisive, and I believe we all agree that he seems an able leader. Elias looked between everyone, searching for protest. But Indune was all of these things. Orion is all of those things. Felipe is all of those things. What's important is the core, their heart. Elias placed his hand to his own. Nicoletta nodded in agreement, but Mina and Stain seemed to think Elias' speech was corny and grimaced. Our main priority moving forward should be to find more out about Gerektig Kiet, Elias said. Argrave is right on that. It is important. My father showed me the evidence, and gods be damned, it's very important. Elias pointed a finger to stress his point. But it's important to learn why he's taken on this task. And it'll be very important to hear what he wants from the future. Elsewise, we might be putting our support behind yet another snake that's naught but a poison to the land. So, what? Talk to him. Stain furrowed his brows but smiled as through the idea was laughable. Yes, Elias confirmed. But just as important as Argrave is the company he keeps. So, here's my suggestion. We should help Argrave with his business here. We should support him as best we can. All the while, we learn everything that we can from him, his plans, his nature, and why he keeps the company he does. It's clear he trusts only his companions. As such, we should be his companions, his shadows, if only for a brief time. Your grand idea is for us to be his lackeys? Mina leaned back in her chair. If that's what it takes, Elias said, nodding completely unoffended. We must ensure a good future, Mina. I'll bow to anyone, lick their shoes even, if it might ensure I'll save people's lives. I must know Parban throws its support behind a claimant good for the realm. Even a temporary good king would be better than what other options are before us. Stain crossed his arms. I'm not licking anybody's shoes, but I've done enough bowing to do that decently. Besides, officially, I work for you. Stain pointed to Elias. If you want me to do it, I'll do it. Mina did not answer right away. She looked to Nicoletta, waiting for her to speak. Even while they were ostensibly arguing, Mina still valued her friend's input. I can think of nothing else, Nicoletta eventually conceded. Besides, I do not wish to see Argrave dead. If I can help him get what he needs to escape from the tower, I will. I'm with Nikki. Mina nodded. Elias nodded eagerly. Good. Then let's put this into action. The next morning, Argrave was awoken by a knock at his door. Without giving him time for answer, Elias bolted in. Annalise and Argrave stirred. Elias paused after seeing them together, but after a brief scan to be sure he wasn't intruding on anything, he launched into his message. The news is here. It's spreading like fire over dead grass. Argrave, Elias said feverishly, his good eye jumping between the two of them. A legion of ghostly snakes? 1,000 giant knights of an age past fighting at your side? What in the god's name? What? Argrave asked tiredly, the word mixed with disbelieving laughter. He threw the blanket off himself and Annalise and stood up, already fully armored barring his duster. People say you conjured 10,000 snakes, ghosts of some sort. Thereafter, innumerable titanic knights joined your side, battering Indune and his knights into the ground. Elias explained quickly. They're eels, Argrave said. Electric eels. Not ghosts. Elias held his arms out. Does that matter? It's what people think. Well, what do people think? Have you heard people talking? Argrave insisted. Elias put his hand to his forehead. There are so many rumors it's difficult to keep track of. We'll have to wait a bit for one to prevail. In the meantime, I'm having Stain spread rumors of his own, that you acted in self-defense. Good. Argrave nodded, his tired mind awakening. That's good. You must add that Indune killed Argrave's mother when he was not yet 10, Annalise contributed, rising as well. That is all but common knowledge in Jericho and many places beyond. But it must reach the people. Elias nodded. Good thinking. It's a good narrative. I will tell him that. Elias vowed. Gods, I guess it's real. You really think I made it up? Argrave stepped aside and picked up his boots, sitting to put them on. Well, damn, early day. Any breakfast? Sure, I can get my people to make something. Elias agreed readily. Are you planning on going somewhere? Castro will call me soon. It might be I'm called to an official meeting with all the magisters and the Tower Master, but I doubt that. Elias reached into his breast pocket. Here, he pulled free a letter. It's a letter of advisement. Give that to Castro. Argrave took it, looking at it. It had no wax seal, so he opened it and reviewed its contents. It had magic signatures from Mina, Elias, and Nicoletta, and in brief summary, reminded the Order of its vow of neutrality. Argrave looked up, brows furrowed in confusion. Thanks. Every bit helps. A knock echoed out from the front door beyond the room they stayed in. Argrave chuckled. That might be the Inquisition. As Argrave walked to answer the door, Elias stopped him. Anything we can do to help? Not. Argrave paused, not expecting such earnest aid. No, Castro will probably want to meet me alone. Ask Annalise, though, when I'm not here. She's the one who takes charge. If anything is needed from you, she can handle the distribution. Annalise stepped to Argrave, holding a thick packet of papers. We spent all this time preparing this. Best not forget it. She prodded it against his chest. All right. Good luck. Elias patted his arm as Argrave took the papers. Another firm knock at the door drew Argrave from questioning Elias' actions. He stepped up to the door and answered it. The brown-haired woman standing there raised her eyes up to Argrave in a near-comical fashion, evidently not expecting to see someone so tall. Argrave examined her in kind. She was not a high-ranking mage, meaning this was a request rather than a demand. Wizard Argrave? The woman asked. Yep, he nodded. Tower Master Castro wishes to see you right away. He is on the top floor of the tower, sir. Top floor treatment. Huh? Stella. Might be Castro's apprentice is there. Chapter 219, Monitors. What have you done? Was the question that greeted Argrave when he stepped out of the mystical elevator to the top floor of the Tower of the Grey Owl. It had been a long, long way up to the top of the tower, his feet fixed to a slab of stone as it maneuvered around other passengers taking similar rides, each going to the various floors in the tower. The ride was wondrous when one wasn't expecting an interrogation at the end of it. Argrave stepped out of the elevator and onto the top floor. What was that? Castro stood before him. Whatever warmth his face usually had was gone, and his lips were drawn thin in a stern scowl. It was intimidating only because Argrave knew what the man before him was capable of. You killed in June, you killed the Crown Prince, and you come here? Castro pointed to the ground beneath him. Do you have any idea the consequences? Castro trailed off. Why am I asking? I know you do. You have to know how much trouble this would cause for me, because it's trouble that you're deliberately placing at my feet. Argrave stared down at Castro for a few seconds as the old spellcaster stared at him in a fury. Then, he nodded. Yes, I know. Castro let out one incredulous, shocked laugh. What do you have to say for yourself? Thank you. Argrave smiled. Castro turned and walked away in shock and awe, raising his hand to his forehead as though to ward off a headache. Argrave took the time to better examine the place. Each of the lower floors accommodated dozens of rooms, with one central room connecting them all to the elevator. None of the rooms were especially small, and there was plenty of space within the tower everywhere. It was wide at all portions. The top floor, though, it had no other rooms. It was one grand apartment, the abode of the master of the Tower of the Grey Owl. Castro had decorated it to his whims. The back walls were all covered by bookshelves, and barring a giant bed well beyond king size, everywhere else was filled with tables filled to the brims with oddities and riches. It was incomprehensibly disorganized, resembling a hoarder's stash more than a grand wizard's vault, yet everything within spoke of practicality instead of luxury. In the very back, there was a small cluttering of things where he could faintly see a shadow moving. The shadow was a person's, but the person was hidden behind a stack of objects. Ingo is here, Argrave noted. Then Castro doesn't think I'm dangerous. What is this they speak of? Castro stepped back to Argrave, drawing him from his observations. A legion of ghostly snakes? And don't think to lie to me. Castro shouted, his voice containing power belying his age. I'm at my wit's end with you. It's a spell. Can I demonstrate? Argrave held his hands out, and when Castro didn't protest, demonstrated. Electric eel. An eel, not a snake. I can see how people might be confused. An elemental spell. Work from the Order of the Rose. Castro identified at once. They always fancied using animals, other grandiose constructions like knights or mythical creatures. Castro stepped away, shaking his head in exhaustion. Argrave, you will be the death of me. You're a healthy man. You'll live a while yet, Argrave quipped. His quip incited anger, and Castro stepped up to him. Do you feel no remorse? No shame for so blatantly using the Order for your own end? No, Argrave said at once. Because what I use, I'll return tenfold. Ha. Castro laughed. You made my tower a proxy for a struggle of power with King Felipe. How will you return that tenfold? Will you make 10 kings, my friend? I'm not sure 10 exist on Berendir, and if they did, not a one could compare to the influence Vasco wields. Some thesis. You think that will compare at all? The locations of some fortresses from the Order of the Rose? Argrave reached into his coat and pulled out a packet of letters. handing them to Castro. Annalise and I put this together. It's a collection of evidence that leads to irrefutable proof of something you're just beginning to look into. They're all leads you can follow up to find out the truth. Castro took the packet and held it up. I don't care what this says, Hargrave. I guess we'll all die, then. Hargrave smiled. Castro frowned, then looked back to the packet. Wait here, he commanded, then walked away to go read the document. I am not sure what this has to do with helping Hargrave, Nicoletta noted as they walked around the lower levels of the Tower of the Grey Owl. It has nothing to do with it, Annalise confirmed. Stein and Duran will collaborate to control public opinion in whatever limited capacity is possible confined in this tower. Guilliman will go along with Elias and Mina as they talk to various magisters in the tower, using his influence as the heir to House Parban. And I hoped for your insights as to the constructions down here, she said, turning to look down at the woman. What do you know about the tower's enchantments? Nicoletta crossed her arms. Hargrave said to speak to you about what to do to help his cause. You might go with Elias, Annalise said calmly. Add the name of House Montesai alongside Parban and Vedden, sway yet more opinion. But considering you hoped to learn more about all of us, I thought it would be more fitting to bring you along with me here in my own endeavor. Nicoletta froze. I will not betray any of Hargrave's confidences, but I will answer what questions I can. And in return, you will tell me about this place. Annalise looked around, where towering stone statues projected purple light throughout the walls. How did you know? Nicoletta asked at once. Annalise smiled. Curiosity is an emotion, you realize. Deliberate curiosity with a motive is easy to read. From there, I tracked its source, deduced things. Your forthright support was the largest giveaway. Yet none of you are insincere, and that is the important part. Nicoletta nodded, impressed by Annalise. Okay, then. Let's do that. Your arrangement. Annalise smiled. Then, please. Right. Nicoletta nodded, crossing her arms and gazing at the stone statues all around. This place. It's a catacomb. When a tower master dies, or a notable magister, their bodies are interred here. Old enchantments allow them to draw magic from the surroundings, keeping their bodies preserved while still constantly refueling the enchantments. Annalise looked at the statues in a new light. Are they kept alive? No. Nicoletta shook her head at once. Only their bodies are preserved. Yet the statues. Those aren't the bodies. Nicoletta shook her head. They're deeper down. The doors only open for important rituals, like naming a new magister or tower master. Annalise nodded, looking to the floor. Hargrave told me necromancy was forbidden in the Order, and illegal in all Vaska. It isn't necromancy. It's something else. Nicoletta shook her head. Have you confirmed that personally? Annalise tilted her head. No, I haven't. But, Annalise held her hand out to stifle defensiveness. I do not accuse, worry not. I am merely questioning. Nicoletta gave a slow nod after a few moments of uncertainty. Then, no, I haven't confirmed it personally. But everyone who is down here are hailed as heroes, and they agreed to be interred to further the Order. Even if it was necromancy, I don't suppose it matters. I see. Noble, to surrender even your body to the Order, Annalise noted, then resumed walking down the catacomb. Nicoletta nodded, then looked up to the elven woman as they walked. Then, I'll ask now. What does Hargrave actually do? He has told you, Annalise pointed out. He is trying his best to ensure this world is prepared for Gerektik Kiet. What does that entail? Nicoletta pressed. Annalise tilted her head. Well, he preserves life, mostly. The Vadiman invasion, the plague, both prominent examples. But why does he do it? What exactly set him on this path? Annalise turned to her. We share that curiosity. I do not know what set him on this path, but he travels it willingly. Nicoletta was surprised at that. Has he not told you? Annalise fidgeted with her hands. Hargrave never keeps me in the dark. Not anymore. Nicoletta processed that. Then, he doesn't know, she deduced. Infer what you will, Annalise responded simply. The elevator in the center. Is it powered by this catacomb? No, that's actively maintained by a select few wizards. Nicoletta shook her head. High concentration, diligent work that requires a lot of activity. Annalise sighed. I wonder if I might try it. Nicoletta wondered if Annalise was being serious, but she could not find any trace of anything besides earnest curiosity on the Vadiman's features. A question came to Nicoletta, yet she hesitated to say it. She swallowed, gathering her courage, and asked hesitantly, is Hargrave really your fiancé? Annalise smiled. We have had no ceremony. I am unsure of this custom's proceedings in Vaska, in Vaiden. These arrangements need only be mentioned to a chieftain to be made official. But he is unwavering on this matter. Sometimes I wish for him to be pragmatic, such as the matter with your betrothal. But I cannot deny it makes me selfishly happy whenever he expresses his unwillingness to compromise. He makes me happy. He has done much for me. I think he would do too much for me if I let him. I have never had someone who is unwaveringly supportive before. Annalise spoke her feelings so unabashedly Nicoletta was the one who got embarrassed. Nicoletta trailed off. Is Hargrave bluffing about the civil war? Lying to make us all feel better? No, Annalise answered at once. He does have plans in line with what he mentioned. Good plans? Nicoletta pressed. We are all Hargrave's companions, but we are not sycophants. nor are we eager to follow him to his grave, Annalise stated plainly. He has had bad plans before, bad ideas, we counsel him against those, and he listens. He has had plans that surprise me. And now, I feel that once we get out of the tower, things may well go very smoothly. Nicoletta looked at Annalise for a long while, her pink eyes meeting the elf's. Then, she nodded steadily. Think it's your turn for a question, she said levelly. We understand that your time is precious, Magister Urant, and I assure you that this meeting will be worth it. A man sat with his arms crossed. His features were incredibly eye-catching, perhaps because they caught the light. His nails seemed to be made of gold. Nothing covered them, but rather, they grew from the finger gold. His hair, his eyebrows, his eyelashes, they all grew gold as well, shining against the light from the window as true as any ring or necklace might. His A-rank ascension focused in earth elemental magic, and he willingly imbued gold into his features. He was, quite literally, a walking gold mine. I only entertain you because the time spent listening to you is less of a loss than offending Parban would be, Magister Urant noted, with a deep voice that seemed ill-fitting on his soft, fair features. Why should I entertain your pet bastard, a kinslayer hiding in the tower? His fate is not a good one. I can promise you. We can both ensure that this will be more than worth your time. Argrave is many things, but wasteful he is not. I am absolutely sure he's fully prepared to give you much and more for your time, Mina pleaded diplomatically. I just don't see it. Urant shook his head. You give me nothing solid. Empty assurances. Please, Magister. Elias began again. This is a waste of our time, Glimmer cut in. The last thing Argrave wants is some copper counter. Let us find someone who will not ring us for all we are worth, so that someone worthwhile might be advanced in the order. Elias looked to Gilliman, then nodded and made to leave. Mina followed just after. Hold on, Urant called out. Fine. If it is only a meeting, I suppose learning firsthand about Indune's death cannot be a loss. He'll find you when he's ready, Gilliman answered, then shut the door behind him. That's 3 of 6. Elias noted. Much better turnout than I thought. Magisters, they're prickly things. She gives good direction. Glimmer looked to Mina. Mina shook her head. You carried the whole thing twice now. You learn things in people's company. The months with Argrave. Glimmer shook his head. There is more to do. We talk needlessly. Right. Elias nodded. Let's get 4 of 7. Chapter 220, Talk of the Town. Casto returned after a longer time than Argrave was expecting. He was worried that his companions would grow worried about his long absence, but did not fear he himself was in genuine danger. The S-rank mage and master of the Tower of the Grey Owl did eventually return, appearing a little more tired than before. What you've shared, Castro mused as he stepped closer. His explosive anger from before gone. It's a ridiculous scenario. Life is often ridiculous, I find. Argrave nodded, sitting atop one of Castro's tables filled with all sorts of metal oddities from the same elven civilization he'd once had Gilliman lure metal undead from. Most were bizarre, unnatural metal shapes, each and all standing as testament to that civilization's metalworking skills, and Argrave sat gingerly to avoid crushing anything beneath him. I endeavored to follow one lead you wrote of, one that seemed simple. I could not finish the path without leaving the tower. Even still, Castro shook his head. Just as important as knowledge is its source. How did you learn of this? Argrave scratched his face. Doubt you'll believe me, but I trust you enough to know you'll keep quiet. I learned in another life, he said succinctly. Castro's expression was inscrutable, and he did not even mention Argrave's assertion, perhaps thinking it mere misdirection. So, these rumors, these movements of yours, from Mateth to the burnt desert to the northwest. This is why you moved to facilitate our defense against this. Castro grappled with the word but gave up pronouncing Girektik Kiet. This calamity. Argrave nodded without hesitation. Somebody has to. You could have brought this before the order immediately. Castro shook his head. I couldn't have achieved anything if I didn't take matters into my own hands. Argrave shook his head. I think the only reason you even entertained what I wrote is because of what I've already done. Mateth, the plague. You could have tried to rely on others. Castro stepped forth. Argrave laughed, then stood up off the table he sat on. Took me long enough to trust the people with me now. I don't think I trusted anyone, not until recently, as recent events have proven. I have family issues. Argrave spread his arms out. But things are finally reaching the point of overflow. I have to start getting the word out. And if I die, you'll have to pick up the slack. Castro held up Argrave's packet of letters. I can't accept this without significant scrutiny. I hope you do scrutinize it. Argrave nodded. Nothing would make me happier than being wrong. But I'm not. Castro nodded, then stepped in the direction of a distant door. Come, he called out to Argrave. Argrave followed, and then the tower master opened the door. A great howling wind sounded outside, none of it penetrating the door. Argrave stepped outside, greeted by a chill. The air was thinner and colder up here, it seemed. Even still, walls of stone kept the balcony from being too cold. There was a walkway leading out to nothingness, where Castro generally mounted his wyvern. Or he had, at least. Argrave could see for hundreds, maybe thousands of miles in every direction. The balcony extended along the whole tower, and Castro stood near the railing, waiting. Argrave stepped up to him. In time, elite troops will encircle this place. High-rank mages, elite knights. Not an army, but more than enough to catch any fugitive. These will be experts at catching and hunting people. Castro shook his head. Our relationship with Vasco will be strained tremendously. Argrave looked down at the old man. There's a reason why the Order can afford to be neutral, Castro. If Felipe storms this place, not only will his army be obliterated, Vasco will lose access to the largest repository of magical knowledge in the known world. He'd make enemies with every magister. Must be, what, a dozen here alone, 50 of them across Berenda, each and all S-rank mages. You have a monopoly on higher magical knowledge here in the tower. Most A-rank and higher mages are loyal to the tower first, not Vasco, simply because they can't get the spells or the knowledge they need anywhere else. No, Felipe will not dare actively hinder the Order. So long as you don't harbor me, trying to force me to escort you out. Castro smiled and laughed. I meant what I said. I cannot leave. I'll get someone else. Argrave shook his head. Just more costly and less surefire. And I can't form a closer bond with one of the most powerful spellcasters in Berenda. Argrave rubbed his hands together, still slightly cold despite his gloves. Even still, what is holding you here? Active trouble with a relative. Castro shook his head. Ingo? Argrave raised a brow. Castro turned, his face intense. What did you say? I know about him. Argrave shrugged. I don't care, so don't worry. But he's proof enough. Vasco will not antagonize you. Castro stepped from the railing, moving close to Argrave. What do you know? Felipe wanted to use Ingo's unique constitution for cruelly effective purposes. You saved him, brought him here. And the king bent. Argrave held his hands out, demonstrating his point. He let you have Ingo. He was a boy, Castro said angrily. And Felipe did not let me have him. He stays here because he wants to, and because the world is dangerous to him. No one should own a person, not even a king, and especially not if they would grow and harvest him like wheat his entire life. We agree there. But Felipe's committed far more monstrous crimes than owning a person, and I don't see any conscientious retaliation from you. Regardless, we're getting off topic. Argrave held his hand out. It is Ingo having problems, right? Castro was briefly taken aback by Argrave's mention of his inaction but did not object to it. He bit his lip, then turned to look over the balcony, out to the vast plains of wintry grass before them. Yes, it is. Argrave wanted to say that he could help him, but he couldn't. Not yet. Not until the boundaries between realms grew weaker. Ingo was someone like Orion, someone chosen for a blessing from birth. Only Ingo's god was not so understanding of human fragility, and until more opportunities opened themselves up to Argrave, nothing could be done. I understand, then. Focus on him, Argrave said. Was there anything else? Castro leaned out over the balcony. I want you gone, he said, letting that hang for a while. So, whenever you choose a magister you deem worthy of escorting your noble self, I'll pressure them. What about my reward for my thesis on blood infusion? That is why you brought me here, no? Argrave said, trying not to let his joking smile seep into his voice. As Castro turned his head back slowly, Argrave cut back in. I'm going. Hash. It's that same guy again, Stain noted, lounging idly against the stone wall of the tower. He wore a relatively inconspicuous grey robe that, upon close scrutiny, was obviously not that of an Order member. Duran, who was just beside Stain, wore near the same thing. They appeared like nothing more than two acolytes of the Order engaged in conversation. The person they spoke of was entirely ignorant of their presence and spoke to a fairly sizable group of people, each and all acolytes or wizards of the Order. He's saying the same thing, Duran noted with a quiet laugh. Same tale. Legion of Snakes. This man's either quite committed to accuracy in this little game of rumor spreading, or he's feeding the people something. Him, and the 4 other people we've seen doing the same thing. Stain gave the man an inconspicuous glance, then joined Duran in laughter. Yeah, you've got a good eye. Never would have noticed this trend. Duran crossed his arms. Much as I wish I could agree with you about how stellar I am. Annalise and Argrave told me to look out for something like this. Huh, Stain noted, taken aback. What does it mean? Got some propagandists in our midst. People putting ingredients in the pot, stirring the soup. Duran crossed his arms and exhaled, his golden eyes appearing to grow brighter. Problem is, hard to tell what the intent of the person behind them is. Doesn't seem wholly negative. There are a lot worse ways you could spin our confrontation of Indune than talking about ghostly snakes. How did things go down there? Stain asked, hesitating. Indune, I mean, we've been spreading rumors, but you were there. Duran looked at Stain. Well, I wanted to just hit the man from afar, be done with it. But Argrave went to talk to him, led him out of town. Stain furrowed his brows. Why? Was Indune's death not the original plan? Argrave was hesitant to sever his relationship with Orion, the other psycho brother, so he heard Indune out. More than that, our leader man wanted to try and be sure no one in Kinzent died. Other than his kin, I guess. Duran shrugged. I thought it was stupid, best idea would just be to kill them all quickly and efficiently. But I guess it worked. No one innocent died. We got out unharmed. You thought it was stupid? Steyn noted. Darren nodded. Argrave is dangerous and precise. I think he could have killed Indune without any risk at all. Kill the prince and all 4 B-rank royal knights simultaneously. He wasn't as confident, so he took the risk. Steyn nodded, then watched as a crowd dispersed. You disapprove? Nope, Darren said immediately. I stay in line, do what I'm told. Haven't felt misled yet. Well. Amendment, I do what I'm told when told by Argrave or Annalise, if he tells me to listen to her. Steyn laughed. You don't strike me as a yes man. I've seen some things, Darren said. What Argrave says usually comes true. Might be fuzzy how? But yeah, he makes it happen. Don't get me wrong, he makes mistakes. He can be pretty stupid sometimes. Man can't tire good not to save his life, and he'd probably be dead 30 times over without Guilliman. He's a bit of a fool for love. Luckily for him, he picked well, or got picked, whatever. But I lost fingers for him, and I'd do it again with the other hand. Steyn stared down Darren. Any more smoke to blow up his ass? Darren laughed loudly, hunching over breathless. His action drew eyes from everyone in the lobby. Good gods, I knew this would fall flat in seconds. Steyn turned away exasperatedly. Let me clarify, this whole thing was Elias' idea, not mine. All these questions are ones he wanted answered. Darren finally stopped laughing. Ah. Gods, I had you for a few good minutes, I'm sure of it. Steyn looked frustrated but gave a good-natured laugh after a few seconds. Yeah. Eat it up, you pisser. Darren stood up straight, standing a good deal above Steyn. Here's a point to remember, though. Darren leaned down, his golden eyes and tattoos veritably gleaming. I didn't have to make up that much. A large part of deception is telling the truth. If you're smart. This earnest support you're giving Argrave, you keep it up. He remembers friends. He repays generosity. And this guy's got some deep pockets, I'll tell you. Steyn nodded. I got my taste from him. Even still, I'm just a bird perching on the big branches of House Parban. I can't do much. Argrave valued you too much for that to be true. Darren shook his head. Well, we've wasted enough breath on him. I'm around that tall bastard way too much to want to talk about him constantly. Should we go back to spreading rumors for him instead? Darren laughed. Gods be damned, you're right. What a bleak existence. If you like this audiobook, subscribe the channel for more videos like this. And join my Patreon if you want to support me, where you can find the complete collection Jackal Among Snakes audiobooks. Hurry up, what are you waiting for? Leave some comment and let me know if you guys like this story, or you have a web novel you like and want to hear its audiobook. I will be happy to create them for you. Please like, share, and leave a comment on the video.